I think Uncle Left Eye summed it up correctly when he said, it wouldn't be 5-watt world if we didn't have a tech moment. It's been a good run. Touch wood. It's been a good run of pretty clean things. So 5 minutes to 4, Tim's audio dropped out, but we're here. We're good. Today's 5-watt live is brought to you with the support of the lovely people at TrueFire, which you would guess from all the purple in the background here. I want to point out a few Easter eggs. If you look over my shoulder, you'll see a copy of Ted Greene's Chord Chemistry. Just really briefly, the year that I started playing guitar, I told my dad I needed a chord book. And he went to the music lover shop in Pittsburgh and he said, hey, my kid needs a chord book. I was learning cowboy basic stuff. And they're like, this is the only chord book you'll ever need. We'll talk about that when we talk about Ted. My copy of the real book's back there. And my Tele, I can't do this. I'm not good at this. My Tele is right there. On the other side, that's a new Rev rig. It's purple and white. I said it's like Peter Honore. If you follow Andertons, it's Peter Honore meets Liberace in the desert. That's what it is. It's got like white Western tooling. You guys don't care. You're here for the Tele guy. Okay. All right. So in the wake of the top 20 Telecaster players, there was a wave. See what I did there? The wave. See, folks adding the names of great jazzers that played Teles. And you know that I spent many years, I refer to as in a jazz coma. And I listened to a lot of those guys. And so those are those guys that, have a love of jazz guitar, might feel that they changed, those people had changed our world, our corner of the world, the jazz world, at least. And I even was brave enough to put the J word in the title of this video. So we'll see how many people show up or how many people watch it. Jazz videos don't typically draw big crowds, but Tele videos do. So anyway, and who better to do the Tele than my Tele wielding jazzer friend, Tim Lerch. Just to do some quick business here. BV Ninja is with us today. There he is. As always, BV is there to help us with the answers to things I don't know. He's always on target, so keep an eye out. The music in the intro was our guest, Tim Lerch, playing a blues on a short scale, high strung, I think it's a Fender Japan guitar. Very cool guitar. We could go off and talk about that guitar for an hour, so don't let us. I'm working on the edit of a video that I'm calling Guitars of Keith Richards 1970 and Beyond, the 1970s and Beyond. It takes you from the end of my other video to not the present day, but because the current record and stuff is generating a bunch of views of the old video. So people were saying all along they wanted it, and of course that's a Tele theme too, as well. YouTube, as I said before, is making it harder to see the links for the merch. So look in the description for the links. And before I forget, if you wanted to get one of the 5-watt world Barber Electronics bus burn unit, Super Sport, Beano, and ODS overdrive pedals, we have a few back in stock in the REVERB store. The link is again in the description. If you want a comment or a question for the gang, if talk among yourselves, I always encourage the group hang. But if you have a question for us, put it in with a question mark and a space, and I'll try to grab it and bring it in. Although we have a ton of stuff. I need to be clear and honest with you guys. I had booked Tim before I did the Tele video, and I knew it was going to be kind of a Tele holiday here with the Tele videos and the Keith Richards video. But Tim is just one of my favorite people to have on the show. I love his perspective on teaching, jamming, the state of jazz. He's just always fun to have here. So we're going to bring him on. And there he is.
Hello, Keith. How are you?
You gave me heart failure because you didn't speak right away.
Are we working
I am
again?
well now.
Okay. I'm glad to hear it.
I was saying to Tim before we got started, do you have a beverage? Oh, I'm well hydrated. I'm thinking, well, my mouth is dry now. I don't know about yours. So
yeah, that was a little bit of a panic, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a little fun, right? Somebody in the Uncle Left Eye said that it wouldn't be 5-watt world if there wasn't a little bit of tech fun.
Yes. Before we go
so what we're
further,
going to do is we're going to talk about some of the greats who played or play jazz on a Telecaster, and we're going to take time out. I tried to pick the right moments. You guys can tell me. I can count on you, to be honest. If I pick the right moments to insert some stuff that Tim's got going on, because there's some very cool things. You've got a new course in TrueFire. Yes. and then you've got a new book, and I've got graphics for these things as they come up, and you've got a new solo record. So we're going to talk about all of that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
And we're going to kick this off. We're going to do artists and talk a little bit about each one, and have Tim talk about that. And then we'll do albums. But Tim asked for an indulgence first, and I'm going to put you. I told Tim I'd have him take a solo. I'm going to put him on screen. He wants to read something for everybody. So here you go. Okay.
In addition to the fine players that many of us know about that we're going to feature on the show today, I thought that I would just read. Oh, by the way, it's Ed Bickert's 91st birthday yesterday. He died, but it would have been his 91st. But I'm going to read a list of people who have either jazz or, maybe not jazz, but good players who've used Telecasters. Sometimes they haven't used them for the whole career, but they certainly have made records with their Telecasters. Just off the top of my head, Sam Brown played with Gary Burton. Jim Mullen, a beautiful UK player who plays with his thumb. Adrian Ingram, also another UK player. Link Chamberlain, who passed away but was a teacher of Ted Greene and also John Stoll, played a Telecaster earlier in his career. Jimmy Bryant, of course, played the very first Telecaster. Barney Kessel. Tommy Emmanuel played a Tele early in his career. The great Jim Campolongo continues to be a purveyor of all things Tele these days. Amos Garrett is a Tele player these days. Red Volkart, one of my favorite players. Roy Nichols. Ray Benson. Ray Flack. David Grissom played a Tele early on before he switched over to PRS full-time. And he was a big influence on me when he was playing on Austin City Limits in 1987 or whatever it was. The great Greg Koch. And also a young man who's really great, Cecil Alexander. He's a jazzer and plays Telecasters. Jerry Donahue. John Schofield made some records with Telecasters. Howard Roberts and Tommy Tedesco both used Telecasters in the studio, as did Barney Kessel. Adam Rogers, a wonderful modern jazz player who plays the Tele from time to time. Joe Messina was a Motown guy. Gary Potter is a UK guy who plays gypsy jazz on a Telecaster, if you can believe it. Some New York guys, Joe Beck, David Spinoza, John Tropea, Ed Cherry, Jack Wilkins, Adam Levy, all play Telecasters from time to time or had periods of their life where they played Telecasters. Nashville guys, Guthrie Trapp, my good friend Josh Smith, and the list could go on and on, but these are guys who I feel like are maybe left out of the conversation in the Telecaster world. So we got to make sure we pay some attention to them. Thank you for your indulgence. Now I can't hear you. Keith, I can't hear you. It happened again. Oh, you're muted.
Well, now we're back at 5 Watt World.
There you go.
I said before you did it kind of as a party trick. You just did everybody in one breath.
Yes.
It was funny. So,
I'm sorry.
That's fine. And I apologize for the mic thing, but
okay.
I'll go back and edit. Anyway, so we're going to talk about some of the greats. And some of those people were in the list. I said to Tim that, if you're a guy roughly our age, then Tommy Tedesco would have been a column that you read in the same way you read John Bollinger's column at one time, guys who, did a studio column, or Pete Thorne. That was bread and butter. I read that every month because it was a glamorous world of studio work, or at least in my mind, it was a glamorous world of studio work. And that was Guitar Player Magazine. That was like, as a kid, it was all about that. But as you said, let's start off with Jimmy Bryant. So Jimmy Bryant and the Western Swing guys, and you mentioned Roy Nichols, and I think those guys all had that, as a jazzer would say, in their bag. Those guys could all do that because you had to. Yeah, that was the thing. So
yeah, Merle Haggard liked jazz, and so he liked Roy Nichols, and he let him go. Later years, he had other guys in his band that were Western Swing or jazz guys.
Right. And the record that everybody should go find is there's 2 records, I think, that he did with Speedy West on pedal. And the one that everybody talks about is 2 Guitars Country Style, which is the first one. And that actually is a really early photo of a Telecaster period. That photograph was taken in 1950 at RCA Studios. That's on the cover of that record. So that's a moment of tele history anyway.
Yes.
So one of the ones that came up just perpetually in the I'll say comments. I won't say criticism. People are pretty rough on these top 20 things. Yeah. Well, I love that people are as invested, but it is just guitar, boys and girls, but one of the names, of course, that came up a lot was Ed Bickert. I'll confess, I needed to do some homework. So I did some review, and I didn't realize that Ed was known as a Toronto player, but he's originally from way out in Manitoba.
Yeah, he was a country boy.
Yeah, right. So when did you become aware of like Ed Bickert?
I got turned on to this sort of trio of wonderfulness, Ed Bickert, Lenny Bro, and Ted Greene, when I was, maybe a sophomore in high school, which would have been around 1975 or so.
This is all part of the Tim Lerch origin story.
Yeah, right. And they, in my mind, they swim together. I talked to Ted about Ed, and I talked to Lenny about Ted and Ed. I never met Ed Bickert, but he's such a beautiful player, and the amount of restraint and pure beauty that he's willing to coax from his guitar is just wonderful.
Yeah. Is there a record of his that you particularly spent a lot of time listening to?
I listened. There's a couple of records. There's a duo record with Don Thompson. There's a trio record with Don Thompson and Terry Clark. Those are on a small Canadian label, and I'm not even sure they're available anymore. And then there's the 2 records that he made with Paul Desmond.
Oh, right.
One's called Pure Desmond, and then one is Live on Bourbon Street, I believe. I get them confused in my head because Lenny had a Live on Bourbon Street as well. But of course, the one with Paul Desmond is beautifully recorded, and it's a beautiful band. And you kind of have to start with that maybe and look for whatever else you can find.
Yeah. The trio record in the research that I was doing earlier in the week was a record called Out of the Past, which was...
there's another one called Garden Party.
Okay.
And it's a live record, and it's pretty stellar as well.
Smoking. Cool.
Yeah. I wouldn't use smoking because that has different connotations. He's just such a restrained player. Everybody loves Ed Bickert. It's very interesting. Everybody loves Ed Bickert, but out of one side of their mouth, they say, I love Ed Bickert. And on the other side of their mouth, they play twice as many notes as he ever played. There's on the Paul Desmond, they're playing some song, right. And Paul's soloing while Ed's doing that.
Yeah.
And then Paul comes to the end of his solo.
Oh, Tim froze up on us here. Technical difficulty. Oh,
am I back?
You're back. Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, the story goes, my story of Ed played comping behind Paul, but then when Paul stopped, Ed just kept going. And you think, come on, go, jump in. And he just didn't. He just kept playing beautifully, not like no one was scratching their head about, oh, wait, Ed should be soloing. It just sounded so perfect. He just kept doing it.
Right. He's like, this is what belongs here.
Right. And then he continued to play, what we might expect a solo to be, where he'd play, notes and then chords. Yep. But Ed is just beautiful. And if you haven't heard him, even if you don't like jazz, you should listen to it because it's just beautiful.
That's great. I thought this would be a good place because there's that kind of restrained thing. I thought, and because you demoed it really, all the beautiful chords and stuff. I thought now would be a good time for you to maybe talk about your book. So the first book was that, like, I've got the copy of Chord Chemistry here. Everybody loves a chord book, but you had this new idea for organizing it. So maybe just quickly touch on that, and then maybe that you could explain maybe that does or doesn't relate to how this book came about, the new book.
The first book is called the Melodic Jazz Guitar Chord Dictionary, and so I was invited to make a chord dictionary. I didn't want to do it, but the publisher said, "Well, Tim, if you could make a chord dictionary, how would you make it?" And I thought about for a minute, and I thought, let's make it so that it's organized with the melody note. The top note of the chord is how it's organized. So that means if you want to play an A minor chord with the 11th on top, you can look up in the table of contents, minor chord, 11th on the B string, and it'll show you all of the A minor chords with an 11 on top will be clustered together. And I thought that would be helpful because that's usually how we think of things. If you're trying to play chord style or chord melody, if you want to call it that, or solo guitar, usually you're being driven by the melody and how do I accompany this melody? Mm-hmm. So now you can say, oh, well, I need to play the whole book is in A root, but you could make it anything. I need to play a C minor chord with the 11th in the melody. How do I do that? I want to play it up high. Okay, let's look for it in the table of contents. C minor 11 with the melody on the high E string. Mm-hmm. And you might find something like that or this. Any variation, whoops, I kicked it over. A whole bunch of chords, maybe 12 chords, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7, depending on what the note is, that has that note up on top and this chord down below it.
That's the first book.
Yeah, and people the feedback I've gotten is that it's been kind of a better mousetrap in terms of helping people to get to the crux of what they're using the book to do.
Yeah, a lot of friends of mine that got the book when it came out, I literally would be in touch with them and I'm like, so what's going on? They're like, I'm working my way through this book and I'm having a great time.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Like, that's all you need to hear.
Well, in addition to the collection of chords all a dictionary, there's a whole other part of the book, which is transcriptions of me playing, and then also a whole system of Ted Greene's V system and systematic inversions, which I learned from him, and then I sort of packaged in a way that was there. So it's more than a chord dictionary. And then there's a bunch of videos that live behind it on a website that you can access that I'm teaching about it as well.
And that's all actually under the Vivo link that I put in the description. Right.
That book is at the top.
Yep.
My new book is at the top of the page. Right. You could search down a little ways to find the first one because it's been out for about a year and a half.
Cool.
The first comment, or one of the very first comments we got on Amazon, was actually a negative comment. It said, well, when I bought this book, I thought it was going to be a collection of chord phrases, and it's just a dictionary. So he didn't read the description very closely, but both Luke and I said, okay, there's the next book.
Mm-hmm.
And so the new book is right here. I have to have it handy. It's the chord phrases aspect of that.
I have that.
Yeah, that's it. Right.
There you go.
So we took my basic approach to playing harmonized melodies. I call it melodic harmony, but that isn't a very searchable phrase, so we couldn't use it in the title. I'm learning about search engine optimization.
There you go. So anyway, how did they get you to? You play lots of different kinds of guitars, but not a Tele on the cover. Don't you think there's speaking of optimization, search optimization? Do you think that's a huge part of how people just think of you, or do you think it's the whole mix?
I don't know. The rock guys think I'm a nut. The jazz guys think I'm a blues player. The blues guys think I'm a jazz player. So I kind of like that. I kind of like that there's some sort of elusive thing that's actually authentic to me because I love everything.
Yeah, I always liked artists that they didn't know where to put them in the record bin.
Yeah,
and the labels hated that.
Yeah, right. And the reason I don't have a Telecaster on the front of either of these two books is that I was told that if it says jazz, you want to have a big body guitar. People would be confused. So, again, it's just another layer of the same
Not
thing.
the people on this broadcast, though. These guys
Right.
know.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe the next book will have to have a Tele on the front.
There we go.
But yeah, it's, I mean, some people would say, and I heard this just the other day, a very established long-time jazz guitar player, New York City jazz guitar player, when he commented on a friend of mine's Facebook post that had Ed Bickert's 91st birthday. And the guy said, who's an L5 player, a longtime L5 player, said, "Oh, I love Ed. What a great guy. Oh man, but that Tele, I can't stand that Tele." And for some people, it's like, finally a guy playing jazz guitar that sounds good to me. Right. Anyway, nobody agrees, and it's all a bunch of stuff that we can play with.
I think the next logical player to talk about would be Ted Greene, except you knew Ted, and so I put Ted last on the chance that we might go long on the Ted section. So if it feels a little disjointed, boys and girls, it's because we're gonna shift to Mike Stern. And I've got pictures and I'm not using them. So here we go. Here's Mike. That's a fairly recent photo at the Blue Note. Of course, if folks follow different guitar players, Mike Stern did a tour with Eric Johnson a couple years ago. And it was interesting because kind of apropos what you just said, they both sort of had to stretch in each other's direction. It was wonderful. The record was great. And then the live footage that they put out from the tour was wonderful. So I was a huge, I mean, in the Jazz Coma, this was as rocked out as I got. It was guys like Mike Stern and John Schofield, the guys who never put their chorus pedals away or didn't until way after everybody else had. Yeah. Mike still has a pretty chorused up sound, which is so completely him.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And the thing that I never knew, I didn't have room for it. I can only have a certain number of slides. His first record, which a lot of people still say is the one to have, Upside Downside, has a whole bunch of different styles on it, but he has a really famous Telecaster on that cover. Mm-hmm. And the Tele was it Roy Buchanan's? Was it Danny Gatton's? What was it?
Yeah, I heard this story, and I think it starts out as a confused story because I don't think Mike was completely clear about it either. But yeah, supposedly it was a guitar associated with Roy Buchanan, and maybe it got to Mike through Danny Gatton.
Yeah, okay.
And that's a guitar that he used, should say that when we first became aware of Mike Stern, he was playing a Stratocaster with Miles Davis.
Right.
And that was where we first got blown away by his amazing musical abilities and everything. But then when he started making his own records, I think he switched to a Tele, and it was that old Tele, a 53 probably,
it was a 53, right? Yeah.
that had a humbucking pickup in it when he got it.
Okay.
And then I think he had some kind of blade pickup in the back that maybe he put in so that it would match better with the humbucker.
Yeah.
And he played that for a long time, and then I think it was deemed a little too expensive to travel with. Yep. And then he started using this Pacifica, the Yamaha Pacifica, right, which he's used ever since.
Right, and morphed into a signature model.
Right. And the funny thing about that guitar is Mike is an interesting player. He has a set of strings that's like 10 to maybe the low 40s, like a 10 to 42. And so that's already a little light, especially on the bottom end, that we think of as a jazz guy would do.
Sure.
But then also his action is really high. It's like it was uncomfortable to play it. So
where did you run into him? Where you got
he came out to Seattle on a couple of occasions and did some teaching things, and I happened to be able to check it out.
Yeah, I was really into. I used to joke that I was very open-minded about music, that I would listen to anything that was recorded between 46 and 64. That was my and nothing outside of that. And it was all jazz. And he did a record around that same time. In that window of time, he did a record called Standards and Other Songs. Yeah,
right. It was live at one of those little like Smalls or something.
Was it, or the 55 bar, right?
55 bar. That's
where he had. I mean, I don't know how long he played at the 55 on Monday nights, but it was forever.
Yeah, for a long time.
You could go to see it.
Yeah, that was a great record. That Standards. He still had a chorus on it, but I think he was playing on 175 on that record.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he might have been pictured with it. That's why it went into my head. Isn't it funny how if you listen to Blow by Blow,
right,
you think it's a Les Paul.
You think it's the whole record is that
that's what he's holding 54.
On the
yeah, but it's not. There's the Telegib is on there and other things. So yeah.
yeah, exactly.
It's funny how that works.
Right. The other one that I was huge, really big John Abercrombie fan, and people might be surprised that I squeaked him in here. But the fact is that Abercrombie played Sadowski Tele style guitars with all different kinds of pickup combinations, with his always with the organ trio. And the 3 records that he made with his organ trio they were just on repeat in my car when I was in college. I stumbled on them and I was just blown away. And that's how actually I got to know John Abercrombie's playing. I think in this photograph, you can see that he's playing with his thumb. By this point in his career, he was playing just with his thumb.
Right. Later on. And he made some organ trios earlier, like maybe his first record, Timeless, maybe. That was an organ trio, although it didn't sound like one. It wasn't a traditional organ trio. Well, and his first gigs were organ trios. His
journeyman stuff was like Jack McDuff and stuff like that. Yeah. He started playing with his thumb and he turned the chorus off, which was nice. Yeah. It was very cool. So I think of that as a very blues heavy, organ trio music stuff. So I'm going to do my TrueFire ad, and then perfectly we will transition to having you talk about your solo jazz course.
Okay.
All right. So let me scroll down here, and I'm gonna go solo on screen here. Give me a second. There we go. Everybody knows the story. I think I started using TrueFire because I was living up in the mountains in New Hampshire and I was having trouble finding a teacher. I eventually signed up for the All Access Pass and started using all this different stuff. This is all before the channel started. This is like a year or two before I started the channel. There's over 45,000 lessons in the library covering all different styles and levels. This is the thing that lets me study blues, rock soloing with Jeff Mackerlane on Monday, and then go and dip a toe in the water of a course like Tim's later in the week. Or I hear from friends of mine that they'll do the same thing. John Cordy is always talking about doing that. Oh, and while I'm thinking of it, if you haven't subscribed to John's channel, please do so. He's just under 100,000. And it'd be a nice Christmas gift for him. The TrueFire, of course, has Grammy-winning artists and top session players, guys like my guest today. So really amazing top teachers in their field. As I said, I did the All Access Pass. I set up my iPad in the living room. You'll see, if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see shots of whatever gear I'm testing, like this new Rev setup. It will be out there tomorrow. But it always has the iPad and it's whatever's up there right then. So that's a big part of what I do every day. I use TrueFire every day, really, if I have time to sit down and play in the morning, and I try to do that every day. You can use the code 5watt35 to get 35% off courses. If the link is in the description, so if you use that link, you're supporting the channel and you're getting some great stuff. So just learn, practice, and play with TrueFire, and it helps you get a little dopamine hit. It's to learn a little something every day. What's better than that? Okay, bring Tim back. There we go. Can we hear you?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we're back. And so how did you decide to do this course?
Okay. Usually when I go back to Florida to shoot TrueFire courses, I shoot 2 in the course of a 2-day visit. And this time I had a couple of different ideas, and then as I was working through them and trying to figure out what to do, I settled on the 2 that I did. And one of them was my first course was a very popular course called Solo Jazz Pathways Chordal Improv. And in some ways, this new book on Guitar Vivo is along the same lines as that, playing melodies up above moving chords. Nice. And I thought, well, people were asking, and I decided I could do it, a similar course, but blues-based chord progressions rather than standard-based chord progressions. So I came up with this idea to play or to teach about blues-oriented chord progressions with melodies flowing up above them. And I made each chord progression had 3 chapters, one where I approached it somewhat like an accompaniment, as if you were going to accompany a singer or another player. Then the next chapter was playing by yourself in a way that you could explore moving melodies around with the chords moving underneath them. And then the third chapter was kind of just me being me, doing what I would do with that chord progression. I started relatively simple and went progressively to a little more difficult material. And the reason I did it that way is I want as many people to be able to learn from it as possible. So the first chapters are all relatively, considering that it's fairly difficult to do it at all, relatively doable. And then once you get through the first chapter of 1 or 2 or more of each chapter has 3 different segments. First one being simpler. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of a tiered or progressive thing. And I think it's a good idea. And people have gotten back to me and said, oh man, it's really great. It's helping me, and I'm glad you did it because I've been waiting for this. Right. And so what I thought of doing, I used one of the chapters as an example.
Let me throw the image up here so people know when they hit the page, they know what they're looking for. You also did there's another image with this as well. Was it like an interactive?
No, I think this is it. This is the only one I've seen. Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, so what I tried to do is like take something like this. Right. So that's a little blues-y, although it's it's on the jazzy side of the blues, right? And then what I did is just sort of slowly add in more melody. And go through it like that. And then I use a different progression and use that same approach. So there's 6 chapters. Each chapter has 3 sections. And a lot of explanation and show and tell. And there's some stuff in the show and tell parts that didn't happen in the performance that you can get by looking and listening. So anyway, I would encourage anybody who likes to play blues by themselves on the couch to take a look at this.
Well, it's funny because I just went back a long time ago. Jeff McElwain's here. He can tell us how long ago he did a course. He did a course called Solo Electric Blues. And it was sort of the same thing. He was down at TrueFire and they're like, well, they were brainstorming ideas for courses. Like, so when you're home by yourself, what do you do? He's like your students are going to be. Yeah. Right. Exactly. So he's like, well, this is what I do at home. And he played all this solo electric blues. He's like, I'm just by myself. This is what I'm going to have to do. And so this is another version of that. This is like, what
and Greg Koch also had a recent course that and along this, his version of the same thing. So yeah, because the thing about teaching to the anonymous masses is you kind of have to imagine who your student is. And I don't teach to 1,000 people. I teach to one person. And so what I imagine is that person, the demographic of TrueFire tends to be, people who are interested in learning, may not be in a band, may mostly play by themselves with tracks or solo. So it makes sense that we would, point in that direction. Plus, there's nothing more satisfying in my experience than turning your guitar into a little orchestra that, and this is like a little blues orchestra right here, and I just love it. And it's satisfying. People get happy when they hear it. So,
yeah. Well, and I also think it's the thing that we are always, here it is, the holidays, and people are like, oh, hey, Jenny told me that you play guitar, play a little something.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And you're like, I usually have a band. I usually have, where's my sax player, but this, you can just pick up a guitar and do that. It's great.
Yeah. On my website, right around now, right after Thanksgiving, my Christmas solo guitar package starts to sell.
It really takes off.
Because people saying, oh, better than the day before Christmas because it's
Absolutely.
too late then.
Right. People are like, I should have learned those tunes.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Jeff came in to say that was the best course ever that he did. Course
oh my God.
Yeah, Jeff's out there. Somebody, speaking of the obvious question, somebody said, talk about your Tele that's in your lap. So
okay.
Somebody give us a quick one of what.
Yeah, quick one. 2001 Fender Custom Shop No-Caster that was a closet classic. So it had no relicking. All of this horrible relicking it's the 20-year plan. I always joke that if somebody wants me to relic their guitar, they just send it to me and I'll use it for 20 years and send it back to them. I won't even charge them anything.
It'll be the most honest relicking you could ever come up with.
Right. Big, like a nice 90 or 0.97 here and 0.1 up or a 1.0 here. I put Lawler pickups in. So this is a Lawler Charlie Christian mounted to the wood. By the way, everybody always asks me that. And this is a Lawler 52T, which is a little bit low output for this combination. So what I do is I lower this pickup as far down as I can get it to go, and this one's up as high as I can get it to go, and they balance pretty nicely when you put them in the middle. I don't know if you can hear that or tell, but that's
oh yeah.
And Grolsch stoppers. I bought stock in Grolsch stoppers.
You and every other guitar player. Yeah.
And the strings are D'Addario. This set, which is a funny set, it's 11 to 50, and it's their tension balanced set.
Huh.
It's a little different than their regular 11 set. Round wound strings, unwound G, 19. And it's, for me, on this guitar is what I like 12s to 54, but this guitar prefers this set. On some of my guitars, I use this set, which is 12 to 54 with a 20 plain G string. But this guitar, some guitars, they don't want it to be that stiff. They choke up a little bit. So
yeah, I was talking when we had David Grissom on. He was saying that he had a particularly light. They built him a DGT out of Carina, and it was a particularly light piece of wood, and the guitar was light. And he said he put 11s on it, and it sounded like it was choking all the time. He went down to 10.5s.
That's a real good, that's a good observation. By the way, these are Glendale compensated saddles, but it's the original, Fender bridge. I kind of prefer whatever they make, the pot metal or whatever they do to make the original style bridge. I prefer that rather than some fancy machine perfectly perfect. Yeah. Sometimes perfect is not so good.
Right. Well, certainly not classic. Right.
Yeah. Right. And then I also I put Stumac medium frets in. So the fret is 052 at Stumac. They're not very much bigger than the original ones, but they're just what I'm used to. And so I put them in there.
Taller?
Gosh, they're a little taller certainly than the original ones, and a little wider, but they're not they're not nearly jumbos.
Not a jumbo. Like yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's great. Thanks. I was looking for other questions. I was paying attention, but I was looking for questions. Elite Faye, thank you for the super chat there. Really appreciate it. The super sticker. Somebody asked a question about a video that I did. I don't remember, Mr. Sharp. So email me and I'll dig up the answer. I haven't had Alex Farron on many videos. Alex is a great Tele player. Do you know him, Tim?
No.
Oh, this is a British guy.
Alex. I'm sorry, Alex Farron. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I've communicated with him. He's a beautiful player.
Yeah, great guy. Really, just the sweetest guy.
He has great phrasing and always has a great tone. I enjoy him very much. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's do some more players here. It's already 4:43. Good Lord. So we touched on Mr. Gatton.
Yes.
There's Danny Gatton playing through what looks like a super and a deluxe. Lord knows he was a real tinkerer.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, it looks like it's a blonde. With the one on the right looks like it's from the blonde or brown era. I can't tell in the photo because of the cupcake knobs.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard to know. It's hard to know. It could be a bandmaster.
Could be, yeah, or it could be a reissue. Then who knows what?
Right. One of those. Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So I came across. I think Rick told me to listen. I was studying jazz guitar at Ithaca College with Rick when he turned me on to Danny Gatton, and I have to say that Danny's playing was he's one of those players where you either are completely motivated or you just want to throw in the towel. It just was so unimaginable to me. Kind of like Stevie Ray, Stevie Ray Vaughan. It was like, okay, I'm waiting for Brett to breathe. You know, it's just so much coming by. And then I got the instructional videos too. So how did you find out about Danny?
Well, the same way everybody else did, you know, the magazine article and Guitar Player magazine and all that. And in my situation, I was really ripe at that moment to study him, and I had enough information and enough knowledge and enough fingerboard acumen to be able to pick up on what he was doing. I also was entering into a part of my career where I realized jazz guitar wasn't going to pay the bills, and so I started getting calls to do country. Because at that time it was the very beginning of what I call the Garth Brooks scare of the early 80s. And everybody was line dancing
what'd you call it?
The Garth Brooks scare of the early.
I don't know why you didn't get more country work calling it that.
Well, I refer to that later. Well, it's a play on the big folk music scare of the early 60s.
Right. Okay.
Anyway, people were line dancing and you could work 6 nights a week, every 50 weeks a year if you wanted to, which I did. So Danny Gatton and David Grissom were kind of my, North Star for a kind of souped up hot country, and all Albert Lee and all the good guys, Vince Gill, many of the guys you mentioned, Ray Flack. I had to learn those songs, and I, would extrapolate and go off on my own tangents and stuff. But I really enjoyed Danny Gatton and I soaked up as much from him as I could. And I got those video instructional videos, at least one of them.
Yeah. And then he did later in his career, he did a record called New York Stories, which was right in the middle of what the magazine's called the Young Lions era.
Right.
And he had a bunch of the Young Lion guys from New York on a record, and then he did the duo record with Joey DeFrancesco, which is now that's smoking.
Yeah, right.
That's smoking.
And the thing is Danny eventually made a lot of records. He made some records, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think any of them really show what he could do on.
Oh, froze up again. Maybe we got some bandwidth issues this afternoon. You never know how long it's going to last. Oh,
am I back?
Yep.
I was going to say that although he made great records, I don't think any of those records really showed what he could do on any given night in some joint somewhere.
Right.
Because he was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And he would get jacked up by the crowd and what they were doing, and he was a special guitar player, and he had special nights,
Yeah. There's a couple of people on this list who started pretty young, and this guy certainly did. This is Julian Lage. I was one of the things that influenced me having him in the video. He wasn't missing from the video was how many views Rick Beato's interview got with him. I think he is a young guy playing in a variety of kind of things. We're going to talk about Bill Frisell in a minute. I love that there's these guys who are started out as such straight ahead jazzers who, like you were just saying, play in these other styles or or dip a toe in the tunes of these other styles, maybe is a better way to put it, because they don't stop being themselves. I'd say Lage is very much in that Frisell mode that way.
Right. Yeah. You like all kinds of music, but at a certain point, you got to decide what you're going to present and how your style. So, for years, I was a kind of chameleon because I thought I had to be, and I could play like this guy, and I could play like that guy, and I could play like that guy. Then I realized a little bit later on is I can't keep doing that.
Right.
I don't want to keep doing that. I have to do something that's more authentic to myself. Well, Julian learned that lesson, when he was younger, much younger. And Bill also is like, okay, I'm going to be influenced and love all kinds of music. I very often send Julian little clips of, hey, have you heard of this or have you heard of that? And he's very receptive to finding out about new things. But he's also got his own perspective and his own voice as a player, which is, evolving and modulating like everybody.
Yeah.
But he understands something about his own personal authenticity that I think is valuable. And to learn that early on is, I think, it's a hard lesson, first of all, because we get so hung up on trying to be like our heroes. And some of us never get over that. Some of us do, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes just the truth about ourselves as a player, I can't do that anymore.
Right.
I used to go and bending strings all over the place, a steel guitar, and then my hands just said, "Stop it! Stop doing that! You can't do that anymore." And
Yeah.
something's got to give. I can't play at all if I'm all crippled. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think of that record Arclight and the videos that he put out that were live in a studio as sort of in the round as a real moment. That's a long time ago now. That's like 9 years ago now. But that's a real moment. And so people are like, I want to know about Julian Lage. I usually tell them that, or the newest record, like you said, because it's evolving.
Any of his records,
yeah.
Any live clip. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen Julian play poorly. I mean, there's so much documentation of him. Everybody with a cell phone is documenting this young man's every move.
Right.
And he plays at such a high level all the time. It's remarkable. He's really, really special.
And in particular, the duet gigs that they did that he did with Bill Frisell last year. We're just, and that's where we're going next. So I everybody that's followed Bill Frisell, like I have since, the really early Rambler record and stuff, where he's playing an SG Junior and he's bending the neck all over the place. I always smile when I see this guitar in particular, because it's got a Bigsby. I think this was one of the first ones where he actually went ahead and put a Bigsby on. If everybody's read the interviews, he said that he's very sensitive to the intonation issues of a guitar. And so wiggling the neck was him moving that note into position and in accordance with the other notes that were being played. And I don't think I've ever seen him reach for the Bigsby, but it's right there.
Yeah. I played that his SG like thing. I don't know. Because it ended up, when Bill lived out here in Seattle, that guitar ended up in a secondhand guitar store that I frequented. And the neck on it was very rubbery, as they can often be.
Right.
And as I remember, the intonation and the neck wiggle and stuff is not so much actively pulling a note in or out of tune, but disguising the out of tuneness of the guitar in general.
Overall, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't.
And so if you have a chord that isn't in tune to your satisfaction, and you give it a little swirl, it blends it all together, but he doesn't do that as much anymore, though.
No, he doesn't. And the other thing, I remember when he
and no volume pedal either. For a while,
I was just going to say that he stopped using a volume pedal. He said he talked about it as if he was in rehab.
Yeah,
he's like, I'm in a program to give up the volume pedal. So, and that goes back to him being started as a clarinet player, as a wind player, of course, that he wanted to be able to do that phrasing, and he did that way for a long, long time. I became aware of him early on because I was listening to a lot of kind of Knitting Factory, John Zorn kind of stuff in the early 80s. and angry young man that I was. And then I just followed him on. And the moment for me was when he covered John Hyatt's "Have a Little Faith in Me," and I just think both the live version of that and the studio version of that, it's and this is not a word I would use lightly, transcendent. It's just an incredibly beautiful moment on the guitar. And then of course the record's Nashville, and I made a video early in the channel that the whole video is about Good Dog Happy Man, because that record was so important to me, and I'll go back to it. That's a classic, sort of put it on a Sunday and just sit and look out the window and, watch the world go. Just an incredible player. So
I love Bill, and I have my favorites. Many of his records are.
What are your favorites?
Well, I like the one with it was a trio record with Victor Krauss and famous LA drummer whose name is escaping me. A really one of the great ones. And then the record he made right after that with Dave Holland and Elvin Jones. There's a lot of them, but I particularly like Bill in a trio with a bass player and a drummer. And I'm so happy that that's a lot of what he's doing these days. I think he plays, again, like Ed Bickert, Bill has an incredible restraint.
Yeah.
And he plays probably, when you watch him, there's this almost kind of hesitant feeling of watching it. You kind of figure what he's doing is deciding what to leave out.
Oh, that's funny, because I would be sitting there racking my brain trying to decide what I could squeeze in. I agree that there's a thing about his phrasing where you're kind of going, where are you going to go?
Right. And it's not hesitant sounding, and it's not, it's very decisive, but when you watch him play, there's a whole process going on, which I've sort of just chalked up to trying to decide what to play next, which is just right, or what to leave out, or a kind of self-editing process, which he involves himself in. And I really appreciate that. Yeah. I have to be careful though, because if I listen to Bill too much, I start imitating him, which there's plenty of people doing that now because he's so popular, and it's too late in the day for me to be imitating people or any more than I already do,
Get that color stirred into the paint can, huh?
Yeah.
My editor Perry says that's the Jay Black short scale one. I think that is a 24 3/4 inch scale guitar. I remember in an interview he said that he used to live down the street from, or he lived close but not down the street from Jay Black, and he was terrified that if he did, he would just buy guitar after guitar after guitar.
which he does already.
Yeah, which really is maybe the thing. All right, so I saved Ted Greene because of your connection with Ted. People may or may not know. And then we're going to end with somebody actually right on cue asked about your next record. So talk about Ted Greene. Talk about, if you can, we'll run over a little bit to do that today. So
okay. Well, I knew about Ted Greene because that's a great picture. Because he had written some books that were very popular, and I happened to be working in a guitar store. And so the books were sitting there, and I heard about him, and then I got a copy of his solo guitar album, which was called Ted Greene Solo Guitar. And I listened to that just nonstop, wore it out, I wish I still had a vinyl version, because when the CD came out, they remastered it.
Oh.
And I think the sound on the vinyl record was so much better. I have one copy, but it's a little bit warped, and I don't have a record player. But anyway, I have it in my head. I carry it around up here very, very
there you go.
Clearly. But I was working at a music store, and my boss at the time wanted to go to the NAMM show. And I lived in a town called Woodland, California, which is near Sacramento, and was the worker at his shop. And I taught guitar lessons and ran the front of the store. And he asked me if I wanted to go to the NAMM show. I said yes. So we flew down there and got a hotel near the convention center, in the Disneyland Hotel, actually. And we walked into the NAMM show, and the first person that stepped in front of me said, "Hello, young man, Mel Bay." And Mel Bay, who was an icon, and standing in front of me, shaking my hand. I thought at that moment, I said, "Oh, this is going to be interesting." So we wandered around. I did all sorts of fun things, and I met Herb Ellis, and I played a guitar, organ, and I did this and that, and then at one moment I walked in front of the Dale Zdenek booth. Dale Zdenek is the publisher who published that book that's right behind you, I believe, and at least the next three.
Okay.
And Ted was sitting in the booth in one of the quieter areas of the NAMM show. It wasn't as noisy then as it is now. Okay. And he had a Telecaster and a leisure suit or whatever. The booth was a small booth with all of the Dale Zdenek titles. So Styles from the Studio by Leon White, and there was maybe a Joe Diorio book up there, and 3 of Ted's or 4 of Ted's by that time. This was probably in 1977, maybe 77. And I stood there, like a very happy moron. I just stood there. I don't know how long I stood there. He didn't look up or acknowledge because he was very shy. Mm-hmm. But I just remembered, oh, this is that man. And I stood there, and he had a twin reverb, and he sounded just like he always did in those days, like kind of like a church organ or a B3 and a Telecaster all mixed together. And I was hooked. I was done. I was cooked. What year was this? 77, maybe.
Okay.
78, maybe.
Those were really big years at NAMM because there were all these things that were getting launched then. Yeah.
And it's possible that it might have been 1 year later than that, because I know that Chord Chemistry might have come out in 77.
Want me to grab my copy?
No, it's okay. Anyway, somewhere along the line, my feeble brain does not. I can remember the chords to a lot of songs, but I can't remember.
That would belie my story.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I started playing guitar when I thought I needed to know some new chords because I started playing guitar in 70.
It might be 75, but maybe it's earlier than that.
71.
71. Oh boy. Okay. So
it was sitting in the rack with this hippie typesetting.
Okay.
Nice. My dad went and looked for it in Christmas of 74 or 75.
Yeah, well, that's not the original cover.
Oh, it's not.
Yeah, the original cover was like a tan. The book was smaller. That's actually a newer version. Anyway.
Yeah.
So Ted had written these books, and they were, provocative in some ways, because if you've ever opened up that book, you realize there it is, and
yeah, he doesn't really warm you up. Jump. You're in the deep end of the pool right off.
Yeah, right away, and then the deep end is kind of a relief compared to the rest of the book. It's like off the abyss. He joked and said that his pet name for that was Chord Catastrophe. He realized later on, when I met him and was studying with him, that book was more for him than for the student.
I think all books are more for the author.
Sometimes, yeah, especially if you write it when you're as young as he wrote that one.
Sure, right. You're getting your ideas together.
Right. Anyway, fast forward. I was obsessed with Ted. Fast forward to about 1981, and I was at a session hanging out with guys playing, and I played a solo guitar arrangement that someone said, "Oh, you like Ted Greene? I got his number. You want his number?" I said, "Yes." So this guy, Doug Pauly was his name. He gave me Ted's home phone number, and I got the courage up at around 7:30 one evening and called him up, and we had a wonderful conversation. I was surprised that he answered the phone because he had a reputation of not answering his phone. Mm-hmm. But we had a very nice conversation, and we decided to try and study via the mail. And then I did that for a little while, and then I actually went down there over a holiday and got a lesson. He was teaching at his parents' house in Woodland Hills. Mm-hmm. And then I continued after that to go and study with him whenever I could. I eventually moved down to LA to go to GIT, and would occasionally run up to, he lived in an apartment in, I can't remember the name of the town, apartment number 9 in La Cienega. Gosh, I'm so bad with that era of my mind is not very, I don't have good memories of that, of my LA years. Anyway, I can't remember the name of the little, what used to be a town, but then now is the valley. But I remember it was apartment number 9. And would go and see him and, grab a lesson whenever I could.
That's great.
And Ted was so beautiful cat, but also a beautiful player. Everybody knows that. He got the guitar to sound like I wanted to hear it. And then I continued the course of my life is all about trying to make it sound good. It comes with the lush harmony and maybe the laid back phrasing and the beautiful groove as much as I can manage it. That all comes from Ted. I didn't copy him so much in terms of his arrangements or what kind of chord voicings necessarily that he used, although I learned a lot from him. But when it comes to what I got from him or what I really gleaned from him as a player was his sound and his approach to the beat and all of that kind of stuff.
I think it's the perfect segue to have you talk about your solo guitar record. Why don't you play a little something that would illustrate to put you on the spot, some of what you just described that you got from Ted.
Okay.
For everybody.
Let's see here. That was no good. A little tune called Sweet Lorraine. I don't have a guitar that's tuned down a half or a whole step with bigger strings, and so but that's the kind of thing where this sort of this over ringing, everything's ringing together.
Beautiful. You've got stuff swirling together, but the other thing I'm noticing about your approach is, boy, the beat is so solid. The quarter notes are so there.
Well, I accompanied singers a lot, and they like that. And I also noticed that solo guitar, jazz guitar played in an unaccompanied fashion is often in rubato or some sort of broken thing that for my ear isn't always as satisfying. Sometimes it can sound like a guy who's really in a trio, but he's kind of waiting for the other two guys to show up. And that's all good. And some people do that. If you have good time and you do it that way, it sounds good. It works. I always liked this sort of orchestral thing, and that's what attracted me to Ted. But just to be able to say, so you have all these voices swimming, the da da do 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 dee da do in the bass, and then in the melody, and then all the accompaniment in the middle. That's that kind of strategy is what I associate with the stuff I learned from Ted, and then continue to try and put my own spin on. I used to spend a lot of time on the material that I got from Ted and some of the material that I didn't get from him personally, but that came to me through other methods. Now there's a thing called the tedgreene.com website, which has all kinds of, basically everything he wrote is up there. But I had to start finding my own way with all that stuff. because, I figured I'm never going to just be a TED imitator. I have to find my own way.
Yeah.
And my own mistakes and my own stupid things are the things I can't do that I want to do, and all this stuff that eventually has to happen for all of us. So these days, I'm mostly just trying to make beautiful music with the skills that I have.
How did that lead to the most current record, the one that's is out now?
Well, I have 4 solo guitar volumes, all of which have 16 or 17 songs on them. And what they are is I make these videos for YouTube, and people were asking me, hey, I'd love to be able to take that music with me. Can you send me like a CD of it? And so then the light bulb went off in my head, and about every couple of years, I take the most recent batch of solo guitar performances that I've posted on YouTube, and I mix them and master them into an audio collection.
Wow. And
they start out with excellent audio quality. They don't have videos on them. It's just a listening experience. And this last one, the most recent one, I'm not sure why, but I've kind of don't have as many showstoppers on there. It's a kind of mellow, relaxed, kind of introspective vibe that's on the record. Maybe that's just reflective of where I've been at for the last couple of years.
I was gonna say, is that where my friend Tim is these days?
Yeah. A little quieter and just a little bit less. It's not as important for me to play, showstoppers. I like to think that what I do is fun and interesting, and maybe guitar players would like it and get excited by some of the things that they can see that I'm doing that are pretty sounding and elegant in some way, but also maybe a little complicated or something, right?
Yeah.
But I just seem to have fallen into a groove on this particular record that was quieter and slower and a little more poignant, maybe, and so I put it together, and boom, it's out. I sell it on my website. It's not on any of the ripoff sites.
Okay.
I don't believe in it. I just don't think it's good for us to put our music up for free somewhere and never have. And then the venue that we would have to sell it doesn't exist.
Right.
It seems like, well, yeah, put it on the radio if you can sell it, right? But don't give it to people for free and then not be able to sell it. So I just sell it on my website. I don't sell very many, but I sell enough, and it allows me to fund the project.
Yeah. Well, it was lovely. And Perry, who prompted me to ask you to play a little something, said, I thanked him when you were playing, and then he said we should be thanking you, and he's absolutely right. We should be thanking you. This is great stuff. And it's funny. I've been watching you since the Facebook days, and then it was years before we talked on the phone, and it's been delightful. And now it's getting to be, and I say it every time I have you on, it's like, oh, well, in a few months we'll have you back, because there will be something else to talk about, and there's always something to talk about with you. It's great.
Well, thanks for having me, Keith. I really appreciate it. And I don't know if there's any other questions or anything. I don't think this time I felt the audience much.
I didn't. It's tough when you do these lives. If you're bouncing back in and out, it's hard to keep the flow with the guest. And so I said to people at the top, before I brought you on, that if you had a question, put it in. And I try to watch them as they go by, which is it's all on the same screen for me. Right. So there weren't a lot of questions. I think people were here to hear our list, but also to hear you play a little bit. And I said from the get-go in the description, I said that we would talk about what you're doing right now. So I imagine this was a bit of a Tim Lerch fan.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm in plugging mode. That's how I feel today.
That's it. No, that's great. That's great. Everybody, Marty C says they've all been politely listening. So,
Oh, that's nice.
yeah,
Thank you,
great.
Marty.
All right. Well, hey, thanks again for being here. And I want to thank everybody that chimed in. I want to thank Bebe for moderating for us, and to remind everybody that TrueFire, the link is in the description. If you use the link out of the 5-watt world, you can have the percentage off. Use the link in my description so that TrueFire knows that that you all still love having this connection with TrueFire and the purple world that I live in here of TrueFire. And again, thanks to everybody. Tim, if you hang out for a minute, we can catch up after I end the stream. I'm gonna play that little piece of music again, and I'll put you back in the green room. So thanks again, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Wish I could have seen you.